always at the airport, but I would like to talk about just my journey, my journey and how I eventually ended up there. So let me get my presentation started for you all. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Looks good.
Big picture of the terminal, okay.
Looks very good.
So this is San Francisco International Airport. Of course, now with the whole COVID-19 thing, it's not as busy as it normally is, but it's still it's a very fun place to work at. But let's start from the beginning. So I have these two pictures here. The one on the left is a picture of my siblings and my dad. How I eventually got into the field of aviation. I've always liked things like astronomy and weather watching when I was in kindergarten. And if you were to ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have said an astronaut because I really liked the spaceship and I really wanted to fly it at that time. And then as I grew up, I wanted to be a storm chaser and I got really into weather watching. Still wanting to fly, but that's probably a little bit more dangerous than most people think of when you want to be any kind of pilot. But I feel very fortunate because I had people like my dad, he's a Vietnam Army helicopter pilot. And then he's also, or he retired now, but he was a pilot for FedEx. So I was always around planes and aviation and I loved it. And then of course my mother, who's here with me, or on the screen, is here on the right-hand side. Both of them are at my graduation. She encouraged me to join Civil Air Patrol when I was in high school. If it wasn't for joining Civil Air Patrol, I probably wouldn't have gone to school to study the field of aviation, and I wouldn't have gotten a bachelor's degree in aviation. So if you are out there and you're young and you want to be a pilot or you like the field of aviation, I highly recommend getting involved with a lot of activities to keep up your love of aviation, and you'll find your way there. So while I was in school, I went to San Jose State. San Jose State, besides Cal State LA, I believe those are the only two schools that offer a full four-year degree if you want to get a degree in aviation, so I went there. And San Jose State's a well-known school. Even my father, he went to San Jose State. He graduated in 1982, I believe, and he got his bachelor's degree in aviation before he flew for FedEx, so really good school. While I was at San Jose, I tried to immerse myself with a lot of different clubs and organizations. I joined Women in Aviation, which is not just for women, it's for everyone, but it's really it's a group that encourages women to pursue fields in aviation, not just being a pilot. You could be an air traffic controller, a mechanic, you could be an airport manager. There's a lot of things within the field. This picture in the middle, I did a presentation here when I was in college. It's for the American Association of Airport Executives. If you want to have any kind of position at an airport, this is the organization you need to join. They offer a ton of scholarships, just like Women in Aviation. But this was a great opportunity. The reason why I found out about the job I have now is actually because I met a few people that worked at SFO, and I met them through this conference. And then this last picture, I ended up joining the SJSU Precision Flight Team. It's very cool. You do not have to be a pilot to join. They do competitive flying. They have all kinds of events, things from powered takeoffs. One of the events I got to compete in, I was flying, or I wasn't flying, but I was in the pilot or the co-pilot seat, and my friend was flying, and you have to drop something out of the plane and it has to land in a target. So that was really cool. Lots of opportunities. If you end up going to school for aviation and you're interested in that kind of stuff, I highly recommend joining the Precision Flight Team. And through college, I had various internships and jobs. The first internship I ever had, it was unpaid, but it was probably one of the best internships ever, and it was through the FAA. I got to intern at their Flight Standard District office. The FAA being the Federal Aviation Administration. They are the governmental entity that just handles everything that's aviation related, and they have lots of offices. I got really fortunate that this one is right next to the San Jose airport, which is like 15 minutes away from the school. This particular picture right here, I was with a maintenance inspector. And so the pilot of this helicopter had to fly in from Southern California. And just like a lot of businesses in aviation, the FAA, they go through and they inspect your facilities to make sure that you're running safely. Everyone has their licenses and that everything is good to go. And so the inspector was inspecting this helicopter. And so I got to go in the helicopter and take pictures, and it was really, really
Were
cool.
these ramp checks that you were doing? Is that what these were?
I have gone on a few ramp checks with the operations inspectors, but yes, if you own a maintenance facility, they also do ramp checks on you too. So, yeah. This one in the middle was my first internship with SFO. During college, and actually SFO is really cool because they have high school and college internships. They have them every single year. When you become old enough, or if you're old enough now or in college and you live in the Bay Area, I highly recommend you apply. And they also pay pretty well for an internship, which is sometimes better than unpaid ones. But this internship was great because I got to join the Aviation Safety and Security Office. During this internship, I was able to help do research that contributed to adding cameras to the new air traffic control tower, the large 200-foot one that's at SFO. I'm not allowed to show you the pictures of them, but it was very, very cool. And then I'm also in a lot of the training videos. If you ever work at SFO and you have to get when you get your badge, you have to go through all this computer-based training, and I'm actually in like 2 of the videos. So I've had 2 people at work tell me like, oh, I think I've seen you before. And I'm like, it's probably because you've seen me in this video. And then this last picture over here is from the Hiller Aviation Museum. The woman to the right, you may remember her from a previous Hiller talk. Her name is Sarah. She's an air traffic controller now. We both met at the Hiller Aviation Museum. This was an extremely fun place to work, especially if you love just being around planes and helicopters. And one of the cool things about this job was that I got to teach other people about what I love, which is aviation, it made it way more special for me. So all of these jobs and internships I had during college. And then after I graduated college, I first was going to join the Coast Guard. I had been thinking about joining for a really long time, quite a few years, and I was going to do it, but then I found out that even if you like go through their program for flight training and then like you take their test, if you don't score high enough, then you won't get to fly. The Coast Guard, they do have, of course, helicopters and fixed wing aircraft, but it's pretty selective. And I guess at the time, I didn't have the confidence in myself to think that I could score within the top 1 or 2 scores needed to be able to go to that flight school. But by then you've already signed the contract. And so then you basically would get assigned to a boat, which I wasn't there for boats, I was there to fly. So I decided not to do that. And then I took a job all the way in Iowa, all the way at the Des Moines International Airport in their Airport Operations Center. My internship at SFO with Aviation Safety and Security helped greatly in getting this position. I basically did the exact same things. I also cannot show you pictures inside of their control center, but it's a large room and it's dark. There's tons of cameras that monitor the entire airport. Anytime there's an emergency, you get the call, you're the one that has to dispatch all of the personnel out there. One of the cool things about working in Des Moines was snow. One of the cool things about California is that if you don't want to see snow, you really don't have to see it. If you want to be where there's snow, you can go drive up to see it. But in Des Moines, there was lots of snow. This tiny piece of pavement over here on the left, they were testing out electronic heated pavements. That way they don't get ice, That way people don't slip and fall, aircraft don't like slide off the taxiway and other things like that. So that's why I have this picture. I got to go out there and look at that.
I had a question for you real quick, and
Yes.
maybe you're going to address this in your talk, so I apologize.
That's okay.
When you're talking about airport security, there all kinds of things come to mind, but this special area that you're involved in is more airfield security, right? I mean, the actual operations on the surface of the movement areas and all that at the airport, not so much what's going on in the terminals and that kind of security. Is that correct?
So for my job currently now, that is correct. But for my internship and then working at the Des Moines International Airport, I was responsible for all the security inside the airport as well.
Okay.
So, yes.
All right.
So this is where I work now at SFO. We're known as Airfield Safety Officers. This is the crew that I work with. There's about 10 people that aren't here in this picture, but between all of us, we're divided up into 3 different shifts: day shift, swing shift, and graveyard, which is the shift I've been on for the last 8 months or so, and I'll be on there for the next 4 months until our next shift bid. So what we handle is we deal with a lot of federal regulations. Airports are heavily federally regulated and state regulated, tons of stuff like that. So when you see the words FAR or FAR, that's Federal Aviation Regulations. The main ones I'm focused on the airfield are Part 139, which is the certification of airports. It's a document that each airport has to make, telling the FAA, okay, the FAA, here are your regulations. This document is how we're going to comply and make sure that we fulfill those regulations. If you do not follow the regulations that the FAA has set, you can lose commercial service, meaning you won't be able to have planes taking off and landing. So it's very important that we follow all those regulations. There's also transportation security regulations. For those of you that have flown, if you go through the security checkpoint and you see the TSA does a lot more than just check your things when you're going through security. They're in charge of all security aspects of the airfield, and they have a lot of rules that we have to follow too. And those rules are in TSR 1542. And then with FAR 77, that deals with objects affecting the airspace. So if you see cranes around the airport, cranes or tall buildings, most of the time you don't want to see those things around an airport, and the FAA doesn't want to see those things, but you have to have special permission to have things like that on your airport. Let's see. We also deal with airfield emergencies.
Sorry, Michelle, I accidentally muted you. You'll have to unmute.
Can you hear me now? Okay, good. For airfield emergencies, let's see, that deals with aircraft emergencies, whether an aircraft has a hydraulic failure or hot brakes or smoke in the cockpit, any of those things, we have to deal with those. We also have to deal with medical emergencies. If a passenger gets sick on a flight, we're the ones that have to get the paramedics from the outside. We have to take them through the airfield from the back to meet them on the plane so that they can help that person. There's also hazmat or hazardous waste, like if the airplane suddenly leaks out all of its fuel because it was overfilled, or if there's a vehicle accident and there's like all this fluid coming out, we have to deal with all of that stuff. And then our last thing that we deal with is enforcing the SFO rules and regulations. As you can see, we're all dressed in these uniforms. So at our airport, we have the authority to write tickets, pull someone over if you don't stop at a stop sign, if you're speeding, all of that stuff. So they have us in these uniforms so we look official and just make sure that people know, like, hey, we are the person that you need to come to if you're worried about safety or security or things like that.
I had a quick question for you, Michelle.
Yes.
Without revealing any state secrets, what's the most common infraction that you have to enforce? or are there a lot of them?
I would say speeding, but most of the time it's stop signs. People just don't understand, like just because you're not outside the airfield, like it doesn't mean that you can't not follow the rules. And the rules are there to protect you. I can't tell you how many vehicle accidents I've had to respond to because a person ran a stop sign. And it can be even worse on the airfield because not only are you driving with other like tugs and other cars and trucks, there's also airplanes. There's other things out there. So if you don't follow the rules, you can hit other things and you can really get hurt. So that's the most surprising thing to me. And then, hold on. Okay, so I have this picture of the airfield just so people can understand what I'm in charge of. I don't really go in the terminal. Well, okay, there's only two reasons I go in the terminal. One is if I forget my lunch and I need food. So I'll go in there to get food. And the second reason is if there's a medical emergency and the person is beyond the checkpoint. If you're after security, then since we have security clearance, we have to pick up the ambulance from the outside, we escort them to where you are, and then we can take like the back ways to get you. And then if we have to take you to the hospital, then we just take you out the same way. And that's at most airports. So anywhere outside of this terminal, meaning the runways, the taxiways, all of these other buildings and facilities, we have to inspect all of this throughout our shift. And there's a lot of people on shift. There's normally about 6 or 7 people. We divide up our workload and then we go out and make sure the airfield is safe. So I know now it's not as busy, but on a typical day, this is kind of what it looks like. Just planes are lined up. This picture actually is because all of the planes had to use the 28s, runway 28 left and 28 right. And that was because the winds were very, very windy and like the winds had changed. Normally, if I actually go back, normally all of our planes land on the 28s, which are here, and then they take off from the ones, one left and one right. But if it's too windy from the ones, then all traffic has to take off and land from the 28s. And depending on if it's really rainy or if there's any other kinds of weather, we get planes that have to land in the opposite way on the 19s. And I've only noticed this one time where planes had to land from the 10s. That was pretty fascinating because there's a lot of buildings over here. So it almost looks like they're going to hit them, but they don't. It's pretty cool. At the airport, this is kind of a summary of what I do. You either inspect the airfield or the airport facilities. We go through a lot of training. The federal regulations are always changing. I'm also CPR certified. There's a whole bunch of training that we have to do every 6 months and every year to make sure that we're in tip-top shape to keep the airfield safe. Wildlife management is a huge thing, meaning bird strikes, not just bird strikes, mammal strikes. We get a lot of different wildlife on the airfield. And then of course, airfield incidents.
How do you clear the birds off the field? Do you scare them off?
Oh, actually, so there's multiple ways. A lot of people don't realize that, I know some, okay, how can I explain this? We have permits from the U.S. Wildlife Service and the USDA. And so if a bird gets really, really close and you think that they could cause a problem, you do have the ability to take it or to kill it. But the goal is to not do that. You want to scare them off. And so we also have, guns that you can use that make really loud noises to try to scare them. Like they're kind of like firecrackers, but they're called screamers and bangers and other things like that. Or if I see a flock of birds, I'll get in my truck, I'll like race towards them and I'll like honk my horn and my siren to just kind of scare them away, because you really don't want them near, the aircraft. they can be very, very dangerous. And I've seen lots of pictures. A lot of them are kind of graphic, so I definitely didn't want to put them in the presentation of where birds have gotten stuck or hit, things like that. And I have a couple of pictures. Actually, I have a picture of a flock of birds I can show you. It's really, really interesting. Yes, so back to airfield incidents. Like I said before, an airfield incident really could be anything. They happen more often than you think, but luckily, most of the time, the airplane lands and it can taxi to its gate and you don't have to do anything. But there are a few times where, for example, if they have a hydraulic failure, that means the brakes aren't going to work. So they may land, but they may not be able to get off the runway. So if they can't get off the runway, we have to close the runway. We have to make sure that they didn't leave any kind of fluid or parts on the runway. So someone has to go behind and inspect it. Another person has to escort the tow crew because we got to get that thing off the runway. Because I mean, when there's a lot of traffic behind it, you either have to tell planes to go around, which is very expensive, or there's just it takes a lot of work to have to deal with a stopped aircraft on a runway. You want to get them off as soon as possible. Another thing I want to talk about is security breaches. Those also happen more often than you think, but not in the way that you're thinking. It's normally not a person trying to get on the airfield. It's normally a passenger that pushes out the fire escape because they may be late for their plane and they see their plane leaving and they think, I can still catch the plane. And in buildings, the doors have to be able to release if it's an emergency. So people, they push out, they get out on the airfield, and that's technically a security breach because someone that's on the airfield that's not supposed to be on the airfield got on the airfield.
I'm assuming these are like business jets or something, not airliners with jetways. Is that correct?
No, this is the airliners with, yeah. So they're like, and this has happened multiple times. There's been a lot less traffic lately, so this hasn't happened as much. Or it's a person that has a badge, but they don't have authorized access to the airfield, but they need to do something, so they think, well, I'm just going to push, or push out the door, and then they're just going to go out there. But what they don't realize is that now you have all of us coming after you. You have the fire department, you have police, you have Customs Border Patrol, you have the TSA. It's just not worth it. So if you're ever at an airport, if you do not have clearance to be outside on the airfield, please don't do it. It'll save yourselves a lot of trouble. And our last thing I want to talk about is construction. Especially now that we're having a decrease in flights, we have a ton of construction going on the airfield. And I can get into that later with some of these cool pictures. So let's see. Ooh, so back to what Jeff was saying about birds. This picture on the far right is actually a picture of me and my coworker. If you look closely, there are a lot of birds there. I think at the time we counted 50, but this is really dangerous that they're here. They're close to an approach in, meaning where an aircraft takes off. Well, no, meaning where an airplane lands. So this is really dangerous because these birds can get stuck in the engines, they can get stuck in the landing gear, and they can cause a lot of damage and hurt people if the plane goes down. So you don't want to see this. And they were only here because of this puddle, because this was during our rainy season. Birds are attracted to water. So stuff like this we try to get rid of. This puddle on the left-hand side, or ponding, this is something that the FAA wants us to take care of. There shouldn't be any large amounts of water on the airfield, not only because they attract wildlife, but because a lot of these markings are now obscured. You can't see them, and the pilots have to be able to see the markings if they're going to be able to move safely throughout the airport. So I actually worked on this construction project right here to remove the ponding a couple weeks ago. We had a bunch of bulldozers and they were just digging out all of the grass and the turf area so that they could re-flatten it so that this doesn't happen. And many people are surprised to know that we do a lot of mowing at our airport. Grass is another thing that wildlife loves to hide in. They love to hide in tall grass. And also you have to make sure that the grass isn't tall enough to block any signage or markings from the pilots. So we do a lot, not when it rains, but when we have breaks, we do a lot of mowing and field management on the airport. So we also get a lot of famous people that come to our airport. A lot of basketball players. They charter flights through Delta. This one, I got a quick picture of it while I was doing my patrol. It was from the Rolling Stones. I think before our airport, they were at San Jose's airport, but I wanted to get a cool picture of it. So they charter like entire jets or entire planes for themselves, which is cool. I mean, if you've got the money to do it, I say do it. I don't, but it's cool to see other people do it. And then this vehicle in the middle is called our mobile command vehicle. I get to drive it sometimes, but if I'm driving it, then that means something bad has happened. So as fun as it is to drive, you don't really want to see it because that means that there's an incident happening. Like in 2014 when Asiana happened and like the plane crash, they had to set out the mobile command vehicle. And what happens is it parks in a certain section of the airfield, and then you have representatives from different parts of the airport, like the airport director, the airfield manager, the people from the TSA, the FAA, and you're all in there so that you can plan what's going to happen next. And then this last picture over here, a lot of my job is closing taxiways and closing runways. And I get a lot of people that ask me, how do you do that? I have to talk to the tower a lot. It's very important for harbor communication. And then I set out these barricades to make sure that planes, like this really cool one right here, doesn't go into the area that I'm trying to close. You normally only close surfaces when you're trying to do construction or if there's something wrong with the area, like if it's out of compliance. I believe this day, actually, I think I have a picture, another picture that shows, I'm pretty sure I had the paint shop. And so some of the markings got chipped off, which if they get chipped off and you can't read them, they're out of compliance. So we had to repaint that area. And so to make sure that the paint shop crew is safe, I had to close it.
So Michelle, while you continue going on, I'm going to pepper in a couple of the questions that are coming in from chat. So I hope it doesn't throw off your presentation too much.
No, that's okay.
Got a lot of really interesting questions here. And one of the questions is, how many times has it happened that a plane's been recalled back to the airport because of something going wrong? I mean, how often does that happen? Is there a return to field for an airliner?
So that actually happens, I wouldn't say quite a bit, but it does happen. I'm trying to think of the last. Most of the times they're called back, it's because the pilot notices there's something wrong or they hit a bird. And so they would just, it's easier to just come back to the airport you were at than keep flying.
Right.
I'm trying to think of some other reasons. It does happen. Most of the time it's because of birds or they notice that there's something wrong. And yeah, what are the next questions?
And I'll just pop one more out for now. How do firefighters train at the field to put out fires? Do you have a mock area that they work at?
Yes, the fire department. So we actually have the SF, or the San Francisco Fire Department, but we have 3 fire stations on our airport. Actually, I can show you the locations right now. So on the airfield, we have 3. The first one is actually right here in front of Super Bay. The next one is over here. And then the last fire department, or firehouse is over here. They're training constantly. Putting out a fire on an aircraft is different than putting out a fire on, well, just a regular fire. You definitely wouldn't use a fire extinguisher. You have to use what's called AQQF, which is aqueous film, or sorry, AFFF, aqueous film forming fluid. Sorry, that's a mouthful. But they're always practicing spraying. I see them all the time. They practice driving on the taxiways, they practice driving in between the runways. They are constantly practicing. The FAA gives them guidelines that they have to follow as well. So in their guidelines, they know exactly how long they need to respond. I'm trying to remember, I think it's either from the time an airplane crashes, I think the first fire truck has to be there, I think within 3 minutes of the crash. And then like the next one has to be there within 4 minutes. And it's just, they have a lot of rules and regulations. But all of this stuff, if you're interested in learning more, you can look it up. It's public. It's not like secret or anything like that. If you're curious about their training, you can find the answers to those questions.
Okay.
Were there a couple more?
Yeah, actually some really interesting ones.
Okay.
Let's see. Does it count as an emergency when an airplane aborts their landing and they haven't touched down and they do a go around? And generally, how long does it take for them to do a go around? And obviously, it depends on traffic and holding patterns and all that. But you alluded to that earlier. So.
Yes. So it's not an emergency if the plane does have to go around. The go around can be for anything really. A lot of times, if you're listening to the frequency and you hear the air traffic controller say go around, it's because there wasn't enough space in between the aircraft that just landed and the aircraft that was told to go around. They also go around for runway incursions in case someone's crossing the runway, like a tug that's towing an aircraft across or another aircraft that needs to cross. If they go too slowly, by the time the plane needs to land, then the tower tells them to go around. The only time, I'm trying to think, the only time I can think of it, if it would be an emergency, is if it was a rejected takeoff, but a rejected takeoff isn't the same thing as a go around. The go around is mainly just for safety. The only reason why I say it's expensive is because fuel is expensive. And if you go around, you use a lot of fuel. And they typically come back within the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. What happens is you go, like the tower tells you to go around, they tell you a heading to follow, and then you basically get back into the pattern or the flying pattern that they have. And then you just get back in and then you try to land again. I hope that answered that question.
I think so. Well, good. We'll catch the rest of these questions as we go, but I'll let you continue on. I didn't mean to interrupt you, so go ahead, Michelle.
That's okay. I only have a few more pictures left, and that's just to give people the idea of basically what it is when I go in. This picture on the left, it's some kind of spring. It was very heavy. I picked it up on a taxiway inspection. This is also known as foreign object debris, or FOD. FOD is very dangerous and it can be anything. Most people, when they think of FOD, they think of the Concorde, the aircraft that, the FOD pierced the tire or pierced the fuel tank and it like blew up. That's like the most extreme example, but that can happen, which is why at the airport, we take FOD very seriously. So if you see it, whether it's paper or plastic, a lot of the times it's earbuds. It's stuff that people working on the ramp drop, but you'd be surprised. Like you drop something on the ramp and then I could be driving on a taxiway that's like a couple 100 feet away, and because of the wind, it picks it up and I'll find it. And you find stuff on the airfield that you would think, how did this even get here? But it's there. So this is just one of the ones I thought was interesting, so that's why I took a picture. And then this picture in the middle is of the A380, such a fun airplane. I was doing a perimeter inspection around the water and it was about to land, so I waited the extra 2 minutes so I could try to get a really cool picture of it. But this happens a lot, not the A380 coming in, they come in at specific times. But when we do the perimeter inspections, there are a few places on the airfield where you do have to stop and make sure that a plane's not coming. And then this picture over here on the right-hand side is a pavement failure. It's a fancy way to say a pothole. Airport pavement is probably the most expensive pavement in the world. airport pavement is very well taken care of. And that's because you don't want anything bad to happen to the aircraft while it's taxiing. Potholes can cause airplanes to, oh, sorry, I see someone raise their hand.
Rochelle Burrell.
Yes, I can stop. What does Rochelle want to ask?
Let's see. Rochelle, did you have a question there? Well, she has video, but no, she may be texting in the chat. So let's keep going over to the chat for just a second.
Okay.
Let's see. What about drones? Is that a problem at SFO? Are there drone incursions, and what's the drone situation there?
Okay, so they are an issue, but most of the time it's because a pilot's flying and the pilot sees it, the pilot tells the tower takes the report gets sent to us. We are supposed to watch for things like that, but they're not a huge issue. We haven't had any, at least since I've been working there, which has been almost 2 years now, we haven't had any problems where like, oh, a drone like caused an airplane to have to go around or do a rejected takeoff or anything like that. But we do hear like pilot reports that, oh my gosh, I saw a drone, which is scary. Like you don't want to see that near your your airplane, and then most of them are small enough to get stuck in an engine, which is terrible. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Getting back to the firefighting thing, why aren't fire trucks situated on the edges of the runway to save response time? Other than they might be in the way.
Oh, okay. I think I get what they're saying. So that's actually the closest that they can be. The first firehouse, which is actually firehouse number 2, that one is very close. From the minute the rig comes out, it can probably get to the aircraft depending on where it is in less than 3 minutes. The cool thing about our airfield is that the runways, they intersect each other. And so most of the time, most of the accidents happen closer away from the approach end, because what happens is, of course, the airplane lands and then it goes to where it needs to go before it turns off. But if it doesn't turn off, you're not going to see them closer to the approach end of the runway. But we also, on the 19s and on the 1s, we have what's called EMAS, which is the Engineered Material Arrestor System. I can kind of go back. You can't put anything, oh, here we go. We have them down here on the 19s. Oh, here we go, in here too. And then here and here. Well, we have to put that there because the runway safety area has to be at least 1,000 feet. And trust me, there isn't 1,000 feet between the end of this runway and like the water. So you put this here so that in case, hopefully it never happens, but in case an aircraft cannot take off or something happens and it doesn't, that they'll hit this material. It's kind of like silly putty. That's the best way I can explain it, and it slows down the aircraft. And also, you're not allowed to have, so you wouldn't be able to place the firehouse anywhere near here because the FAA has rules about objects affecting the airspace. So imagine there's like I want to say like a dome or some kind of enclosure. You can't have any large buildings that are near these sections. So we wouldn't be able to put them there. But this firehouse is extremely close. It can get to at least this side of the airport fairly quickly. And remember, if there is an emergency, they're in contact with the tower. So they can just get permission to cross the runways, or we can just close the runways and then they can just drive out here on the runway. They don't have to go like all the way around like this just to get to the end. If we need to get somewhere, we can close the runway that way. We don't have to talk to anyone. We can just get to where we need to go, or we can talk to them and ask for permission like, hey, I need to proceed on runway 28 left to go to so-and-so. And then they'll be like, proceed to go on 28 left. And then you just go.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can't help but talk about accidents when we're dealing with airfield safety. The other question along the same lines is, if an airplane lands short or ends up in the water, is there a boat crew that's prepared to stand by to deal with water rescue type situations?
So there is. Actually, the fire department does have one. It's you can't see it, but they have like a boat dock and they can go out there. The Coast Guard also is here, and they also have quite a few things that they're in our emergency response plan. So yes, they definitely have boats that can go and grab them. Yeah, you can't see them because they're not parked over here, but there's a dock if you're driving around this end, and you just get in. And not me, I wouldn't do that, but the proper authorities would go and do that. Yeah. Cool. Do you have any more questions? And yeah, don't worry about if you have questions about accidents. Accidents happen, incidents happen. That's why we're there. Of course, it would be easier to show you all pictures, but most of them I'm not allowed to show you.
Well, we kind of lumped together some of these questions, so I've gotten to most of them. Did you have anything that you wanted to wrap up at all before we move towards the end here?
Yes. Ooh, no. I just wanted to give people a better idea about what we do with construction, because we're making sure that the airfield is safe. If there's anything wrong with it, like a pothole or a large crack or markings that are obscured. And potholes can come out of nowhere, especially after it rains. After it rains, there are so many. And depending on where they're located, we may have to close a runway because it's not safe. And that's our job. We're supposed to close off the section so that no one can use it. But of course, if it's a really busy day and you close a runway, that can really cause some problems.
Who makes that decision, by the way? Who's the final decider as to, hey, we're going to close the runway? Is that an ATC call or airport safety?
That's me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if I think it's not safe, now I'm not just trying to close runways because, I mean, planes need to land. That the airport's a business. You have to keep moving, But if it's not safe, I'm going to close it. And sometimes the tower doesn't like that, which I get it, because when you close off portions of the airport, that's less portions that they're able to use and move aircraft, and it can really make things difficult when they're trying to get planes in that have just landed, get planes out that are ready to take off. But if it's not safe, I'm gonna close the area. So yeah, but yeah, this is the end of the presentation. But if you have more questions, definitely let me know.
Well, I guess there's one question that I can throw out there that maybe people are wondering about, and that is to become an airfield safety officer or some other airport field specialist. It seems like now you do need a 4-year degree, some sort of a college education. There may be senior people in the profession that maybe didn't have that, but now coming into it, it looks like that's a requirement. Is that true?
So that is true. At my airport, how it works is if you have a degree that's aviation related, that's looked highly upon, but they really just want to see that you have a degree. When in doubt, a business degree, especially in the field of aviation, because aviation is a business. So if you maybe are getting your degree right now, don't worry if it's not aviation specific. That does mean that you'll have quite a bit to learn because aviation is a very specialized field, but there are lots of certifications and trainings and licenses that you can get to make up for all of that information. But yeah, it doesn't have to be aviation. I just got aviation because I couldn't imagine getting another degree in something else.
I guess we can finish up with a really good question that Heather asks. What do you love most about your job?
I like getting to be around the planes. When I think about all of the things that I do on a daily basis, sometimes we have quiet moments, especially on graveyard. Typically between the hours of 2 in the morning and 4:30, it's pretty quiet. I love sitting in between the runways and just watching all of the heavies, like all the cargo aircraft, the 777s, 787s, 747s. I love sitting and watching them take off. That's my fun part. If I can get a picture, I try, but I need a way better camera. Some of the people I work with have way better cameras and they take amazing pictures. But that's probably my best part, just watching them take off.
So you're an airplane geek, I can see that.
Yeah.
It helps in aviation.
So,
Well, I would like to thank Michelle Tripp for joining us tonight and hosting our program. And if you'd like to show your appreciation, you give her a virtual round of applause or use the applause feature in the reaction section at the bottom there. We'll just give her a hand clap. There you go.
oh, thank you. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and be sure to join us next week, next Thursday, as we host Willie Turner for our Vertical Challenge retrospective here on Hiller Hangar Talk. Thank you, everybody. We'll see y'all next time. Good to see you.